finally fixed. Hello, and welcome back to Hunter Tuned. Today we're working on the cop car, Caprice Turbo Sleeper Car. This thing has been giving me some headaches last week or so, and it's been having turbo issues with the oil blowing by the turbo and leaking into the exhaust and leaking all over the damn thing and just burning so much oil and leaking so much oil that it is just junk. So we got a new turbo from VS Racing. If you guys watched the last video, in the beginning of it, we were working on swapping the new turbo onto the old housing, and we got that done. So we have the new turbo installed, and I did this off camera last night, but I fired this thing up, and it just fucking puked oil immediately. So new turbo, same exact issue. I was about to pull my hair out, and I just went inside, came back out the next day, and discovered that I just said, okay, I'm going to try this one more time, because with the old turbo, I ran the drain line straight into a bucket to eliminate the drain from being an issue, and it was still smoking. I did that with this turbo, and the drain going into a bucket, no smoke, no leaking, no nothing. Like, it was fixed. So I'm like, okay, so I looked at the drain line on the pan, which is above the oil level, and it was also... So I looked at the drain into the pan, which is in the sump area, which is not a good place to have the oil return line. And I also looked inside of the bung that they bolted onto the sump of the oil pan, and the hole they drilled is smaller diameter, I believe. So it's just a bad place for the oil return line to be. Like I said, I kind of thought that that spot was okay because it was above the oil level. No oil was leaking out when the cap was off. And I figured it was an okay spot considering it was above the oil level, but did not consider inside diameter of the hole was puny. So yeah. So anyways, moral of the story is I redid the return line, and I ran the return line into the front of the oil pan, just like I do on the Mustang and my truck and everything like that. And ran a 5/8 hose instead of 1/2 inch. So it's a bigger hose, and it's going into the front of the oil pan, and this thing is fucking mint, guys. I finally got to run it for longer than a minute without smoking my whole garage out. I actually ran it for like 15-20 minutes, got it up to 205 degrees, did a whole bunch of stuff, and this thing is just freaking mint now. It's not leaking no oil, not burning no oil, and it's just dialed. What I've been doing in the last couple days on it that I haven't filmed is I've been trying to get the turbo to mount up properly with this fuse panel sitting in the engine bay and all these wires that are in this car. So the ECU is in the freaking engine bay, the fuse box is in the engine bay, and there's a bunch of wiring for like air conditioning and fans and relays and just a bunch of stuff that's in the engine bay here that is in the way of running like the fans and everything else. So with the turbo in its new proper position level, the fuse panel that they had, it was when he dropped it off, the fuse panel was just sitting like right in front of the turbo with no cover on it, and it was just barely fitting. So what I did is I actually just rerouted. There's a whole bunch of wiring under this thing, under the fuse panel right here, and this is literally as best as I could get it. I got the fuse panel to kind of sit in the engine bay. I zip tied some of the wiring out of the way of the AC compressor way down under there. I zip tied a lot of these wires kind of out of the way and tucked down. That was like literally a few hour job in itself, just to kind of get these wires tied away to the point where they weren't rubbing on anything, and I can have clearance up here where the turbo is, so I can actually put an air filter on this turbo. Holy fucking air filter. Or a screen or whatever this guy decides to put on here. He did mention putting a filter on it, so I might go get him a filter for this thing so we can put a cone on the end of the turbo so he doesn't suck anything up. But the way that this thing was set up with the fuse panel sitting up here and the wiring and all that stuff, if you guys have been following for a while, I actually had a 78-75 on my Mustang for a while, and I ruined the turbo because the turbo actually sucked up some wiring, and it chipped all the compressor blades to all the shit, and it was because there was wiring and stuff sitting in front of the turbo. So this is a kind of a main concern of mine, is just to get this wiring tucked out of the way enough so it doesn't interfere with anything coming into the turbo. So I did that, and I ran the return line. This is just a new black hose that I ran down here. He had some AN eBay line, or the cheaper AN line, and I run the heater hose stuff with clamps and barb fittings like on everything, because my truck has been like that for over 10,000 miles. My Mustang going 9s has regular hose with hose clamps and barb fittings, and never have any issues. This isn't a pressurized setup here. The return line is literally just just like a drain. It's not pressurized or anything like that. So running a barb fitting with hose is really no big deal, in my opinion. And plus, there was no way for me to get an AN fitting in the front of the pan with the way that the pan is set up on this thing. It was kind of a pain in the ass to get the... I'll show you guys down here quick. So normally on the front of the pan, yeah, there's literally, you can't see anything up here. This was literally a pain in the ass to get this drain line situated into the front of the pan, but I have the hose right here, and it's going into the front of the pan right there. I've been running this thing, and it does not leak whatsoever. I tapped it 3/8 pipe, and I RTV'd the threads, so no oil will ever come out of this thing. I can guarantee it. My truck, like I said, guys, I have the same setup, and I have the same setup on my Mustang, and I've never had any oil even seeping out of the threads on this thing. These pans are really thick, so with the thickness of the pan, you can get a lot of good threads on the pan to tap a fitting into them. So anyways, normally there's this bracket with a bunch of wiring, and it's all bolted right in front of the pan here. And it's got two 10mm or three 10mm bolts kind of all around the perimeter of this wiring that is up here. Right where my finger is right now, this is like a metal shield for some wiring. And it sits right under the crank pulley, or right under the harmonic balancer here. And it blocks the front of the pan, so you can't get a fitting into the front of the pan unless you take that bracket off. And in my case, I just zip tied it down, because this thing is so tight in here with the AC lines and the power steering and oil cooler lines all still hooked up. It's kind of a pain to get a lot of this stuff situated in here and still retain all the factory stuff like he's doing. So I did just manage to zip tie some of that stuff down out of the way. And we got the return line into the front of the pan, and I have a cap on the old return. So this is the old one. I just put a 10 AN cap over that, and that's all good to go. I also ran the wastegate line, so I just have some tubing here, vacuum tubing, and I ran that under the pan and to the wastegate over here. This wastegate is on the bottom of the car on the crossover. This wastegate also has coolant ports on it, which you don't need really. This is for like some super high performance stuff, which, this car is just going to be a street car, so it's not going to be, a 6-second monster or anything like that. But these VS Racing gates do come water cooled as an option, but I've never hooked it up personally and never really needed it. So yeah, but anyways, we got the return done. We got the vacuum line to the gate all ran. Oh, fuck. I'm getting old, guys. All right, so anyways, moving on here. If you guys know, we re-welded the manifold to get the turbo to sit right, and I had to redo the downpipe as well to kind of get the downpipe to fit properly. I also had to fix a spark plug wire back here because it was arcing on the downpipe, so I did that. And I also, what else did I fucking do here? So I ran the vacuum lines. I got a barb fitting for the front of the turbo here, so we can run a fitting off of the turbo. That line goes right to the wastegate. And yeah, so also this car had no brakes, or it had really shitty brakes. And I'm like, wow, like it pushes right through the converter. I can't get it to stop. Holy shit, what's going on? And I was like, the brake pedal just feels kind of hard. It doesn't feel like the brakes are shot. It just feels like the brakes are hard. So I actually found a brake booster line coming off the brake booster that was not hooked up to anything. So I actually ran on the back of these LS1 style, LS6 style intake manifolds. They have a brake booster line that comes off the back of the manifold right above the oil pressure sensor. And they teed the oil pressure sensor in order to run the feed line on this thing, so there was no room to hook up the brake booster line. It was super tight in the back of the manifold there. I don't think I'd even be able to get the camera back there. It's so tight. But they have the T back there, and the brake booster line, there's like barely any nipple showing in order to get the brake booster line hooked up. So I ended up getting the brake booster line hooked up properly, and I zip tied over the connection just like I do on pretty much all the vacuum lines that I run, unless they're really snug fit, like a lot of this stuff already is. But yeah, so anyways, brake booster line's hooked up. The idle should be lower now because before it was idling around 1100 warm, which this thing should idle around 850 or so, which I'm going to go through the tune and check over that stuff too. I haven't checked over the tune really at all on this thing. I just threw a base file on it, and it's been idling and stuff good. But yeah, tuning this thing might be a whole nother can of worms. But so yeah, like I said, all that stuff is dialed. Now I'm just redoing the intercooler piping on this thing because, like I said, with redoing the turbo hot side here, the turbo position is a little bit different as well. So I'm going to try to get the turbo to route the piping a little bit different. They had a like 45 degree, 2.5 to 3 inch coupler going down, and I just kind of didn't like how it was ran personally. So I just got a 2.5 to 3 inch coupler that he had in the trunk, and then I have 90 that I'm cutting and making right now. So this is just a 90 piece, and I'm going to try to jam this thing in here. I haven't even test fit this yet, so I have no idea if it's going to work. Yeah, it might be a little bit too tight still. I might have to clock the housing a little bit different. But in theory, I want the piping to sit kind of like this, and you know, hopefully go down right to the intercooler down here. There's a pipe that goes down to the intercooler, and I got to tighten all those clamps up. And yeah, so hopefully this thing's gonna be good to go here pretty soon. I'm just gonna keep knocking work out on it here, and keep you guys updated as I go. That's kind of how I do things around here. Just kind of update you guys on stuff that I'm doing. But anyways, I'm gonna get to the intercooler piping here, get that finished up, and then I might take this thing for a quick test drive. All right, guys, back with another update. This car doesn't give me a break. I've been wrenching on it all day, and I got it running really good, and I actually like gave it a couple heat cycles, and I didn't really, I mean, I was looking underneath the car by the oil pan and stuff like that, and I didn't see any oil leaking anywhere. So I was like, okay, sweet. Dropped it down onto the ground, and when I went to go grab the jack stand out of the driver's side, I noticed that it's leaking oil back by the transmission. So I'm like, what the hell's this all about? So I inspect it, I let it run, and it's just dripping from the transmission area, and it's not transmission fluid, it was engine oil. So I'm like, what the hell? So I was like checking the oil cooler fitting lines and like making sure all that shit was tight, making sure brake cleaning it all off, making sure it wasn't coming from like, you know, the oil cooler fitting line, because it's kind of over by the tranny a little bit, and I couldn't find anything. And honestly, the oil was coming from up top and dripping down the bell housing and coming down the side of the transmission, only on the driver's side. So I was like, okay, there's only one thing it can really be, and that's the damn oil pressure sensor, which is on the back of the block, which is where they tapped the turbo feed line into. They got an adapter piece. I took it out already, but it's located on the back, way back here on the intake. You got to have a special socket to get it out. And I had the socket and shit, so I unplugged it, and I unthreaded the feed line, which is a bitch and a half on the back of the firewall there, because you gotta, like, I don't know, it was like a quarter turn at a time trying to get the line out. And then I finally got the feed line out, and I noticed that it's got a little bit of a kink in it, but it's not bad. I would still run this. It's not bad at all, but there was no sealant on the threads at all. No sealant on the feed line threads. This is pipe threads, so you got to put sealer on it. Otherwise, they do leak on the one end, and then the other end is a flare fitting. Those ones you don't need to thread tape or RTV or, you know, thread seal. But this, he got an adapter with this thing. So there's an adapter that adapts the LS stock oil pressure sensor to 1/8 inch, and the factory oil pressure sensor will still fit into the top of this, and then it gives you 3 accessory 1/8 inch pipe thread ports on the side here. So the feed line was screwed into one of them, and then the other 2 had plugs in them, but they were loose. They were not tightened down, and that was the majority of the leak, is because they were loose. I'm glad I caught that, because if those screws would have backed out, it would have been spraying oil everywhere. So I found out, and I took the whole fitting out. This is like a cheap kind of aluminum cheesy little thread-on adapter fitting here. So what I always do is I just RTV the threads on the plugs, I actually thread chased the threads on it as well because I have an 1/8 inch pipe thread tap. So I just took my pipe tap and I just chased the threads on all of the 1/8 inch pipe thread ports. And I'm just going to plug off 2 of them with RTB, and then I'm going to reinstall this thing, and I'm going to RTB all the threads too along with the washers because it doesn't hurt to put a little bit of sealer on all this stuff. So I'm going to just install the plugs here and get this thing back installed, and like I said, put RTB on some of the other stuff as well. But yeah, it's just these little screws, little hex plugs. So I gotta just goop up the threads, thread them in, and hopefully this damn oil leak is gone. But it was an oil leak where it was like it wasn't pouring out. It was more or less like steady seeping. It was steadily seeping out of those fittings, and I didn't notice it until I ran the car for like 15 minutes without any other oil smoke going on under the car, or under the hood, or whatever, where I actually noticed that the oil was dripping back by the transmission. So I'm gonna get this sorted out. Like I said, I got the intercooler piping all done. That's all ready to go. I actually lowered it down onto the ground, and I was gonna fucking go take it for a test drive, but then I noticed this oil leak. I just put fresh oil in it too, so this sucks. Hopefully I didn't waste too much. So yeah, anyways, I'm gonna keep plugging away at this thing, and hopefully we'll be able to drive it. But a little shit like this, it's always something, ain't it? Always something. Alright guys, so I fixed the leak. I'm thinking at least I fixed the leak. I'm just letting it idle right now. Try to run it for a couple minutes and see if I can see any oil coming out of the back of the tranny again. And I'm kind of reaching back there, feeling with my fingers over by the oil pressure sensor to kind of see if the oil is still seeping out of there or not. And I crawled back there about a minute ago and it wasn't leaking, so I'm giving it a little bit of time. Gonna check again here in a second. And yeah, so this thing runs real good though. I mean, other than having a bunch of little issues. I'll show you under the car here. So there's the puddle of oil all over here. It just poured all over. But now I wiped the tranny off and the tranny's dry now, so I'm thinking I fixed it. I also got to tighten this clamp up because it's loose as a goose, the V-band clamp, and then tighten that. There's another bolt on the AC pulley, or on the AC bracket, fucking majig, that is loose. The alternator bolt thing over here is loose. Bunch of little stuff. This is what I do when I go through cars. That's why I always tell people, like, hey, it's not just a tune. It's not just this or that. Just drop the car off. I'll go through the damn thing, make sure it's like roadworthy, and then I'll call you, kind of thing, you know. So this is what I do with a lot of customer stuff. Is you know, I like to go through it because a lot of times on a fresh build, a lot of people, you know, they forget little things. So it's best to bring it to 100 tuned, you know what I mean? So this thing fucking runs mint though. Just purring. Got new oil in it. I'm gonna check under here one more time. No oil coming out. She good to go. Alright guys, another update on the Caprice here. I did just take it for its first test drive down the street. I did not film because I was more concerned about breaking down driving down the road than bringing the camera with, plus I didn't have anybody with me. So I took this thing for a drive and it drives extremely good actually. I fixed the brakes, the brake issue with that brake booster line not being hooked up, and the oil leak is fixed. So that is dog pile fucking chicken smile. I'm stoked that this thing is actually up and running and it took its first drive. So that is a good sign. The tune definitely does need some work, and I'm actually going to be heading in for the rest of the night, and I'm going to be checking out all the stuff on this E38 computer, and I saved all the engine light codes that it does have, and I'm gonna just kind of go through all the tables and stuff tonight while I'm editing video, and just kind of go through everything and see, like, you know, what I got to change or what I got to do to get this thing to run good. It seems to run really good. Like the fuel map seems like it's pretty close. It's lean cruising. It's like 16.5, 17.0 cruising, and then you like just barely get into the throttle and it comes up to like 15.5. So it probably needs about 10 or 15% of fuel everywhere on the fuel map, I would assume. So I'm going to do that, and then I got to figure out why the transmission. I'm really hoping the transmission doesn't have any issues with this E38 and running speed density. I know I've heard from a guy that if you delete the mass airflow sensor on these cars, the 6-speed 6L80 tranny doesn't like to shift, and it shifts really weird or something without the mass airflow, because the mass airflow takes in like voltage, something from the mass airflow signal. It gives the transmission shift points and pressures and all that kind of stuff off the mass airflow, so if you don't have that, the tranny gets all weird. So I'm hoping that I can try to tune around that or try to figure something out. It also dies when I put it in neutral, which is weird, and then if I come up to a stop and I put it in park, it dies. I'm not exactly sure about any of this stuff, guys. Like I said, I'm going to try to just go through the HP tuners tonight and check out the editor and see what we can figure out, if we can figure something out. I know I got a couple guys on here that actually reached out to me a while back and offered me help with HP tuner stuff. I can tune pretty much anything pre-E38. I'm just a little bit inexperienced with the E38 still. I do have quite a bit of knowledge with HP tuners, but the E38 stuff is like a whole nother ball game. It's a lot more complex, and it's a lot more stuff to go through to get it to run properly and whatnot. So I'm going to do what I can, guys, and I'll keep you updated on this thing, and hopefully we can take it for another drive tomorrow once I punch some more fuel in this thing and get it to you know, shift properly and stuff like that. It does shift, like it shifts gears going down the road, but it's just weird that it dies when I put it in neutral and it died when I put it in park. So that's kind of weird. Like I said, it probably just needs some tuning. So we're going to look at everything on the computer. And yeah, but anyways, thanks for watching the video, guys. I'm super stoked that this thing is up and running finally. Another day, another dollar, I suppose. I'm trying to get this thing as good as I can get it for this guy, because he is a pretty close family friend, or you know, he is a family friend. So yeah, anyways, hit me up with all your V8 needs, guys. If you need some assistance with your LS turbo build or anything like that, I can help out for sure. So let me know. But anyways, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you guys thought of today's video, and we will see you in the next one.